I'm Frank Vaughn. It's June 19th, 2025, and I can't help but conclude that any negotiations with Ottawa, this idea that Western Canada can engage in good faith negotiations with Ottawa, just gives them more time to tighten the noose around our neck, which is what their legislative agenda reveals. Now, we're going to go to a press conference that was given yesterday between Premier Smith and Scott Moe, where they discussed issues facing Western Canada while continuing to indicate their commitment to engaging in negotiations with Ottawa, a government that the evidence has clearly shown cannot be negotiated with or relied upon. They hate Western Canada. Mark Carney's no different. But let's have a listen anyway.
Getting those resources to the world. The very fact that Bill C-5 has been introduced, which is a bill to legislate around the current regulatory process that we have, I think is an admission that this hard work does have to happen. And so we've been supportive of, yes, prioritizing projects in the short term, which is really a stopgap to fixing the entirety of the regulatory process that we have in Canada so that all projects can move forward. In Saskatchewan, we don't have one or two or three projects that are a priority. We have literally in excess of 100 projects.
Everything after bringing up Bill C-5 is largely irrelevant. Bill C-5 is an attempt by the federal government to further choke out provincial autonomy. It's a Trojan horse, and it's accompanied by several other Trojan horse bills, which I have covered on this channel in previous videos. Go watch them. I'll probably discuss them again, but I'm not going to discuss them today. But just a quick summary, we're talking about bills surrounding Indigenous rights. We're talking about bills surrounding land management planning. We're talking about bills dealing with the eligibility of a province to pull out from the Canada Pension Plan, needing the permission of other provinces, and Bill C-5, which further consolidates power in the federal government's hands. The carrot that the federal government is offering, and it's such a small carrot, is that if the provinces get on board, they will have their projects developed and they will get guaranteed access backed up by the federal government to impose that access upon provinces that wish to oppose that access. Quebec has come out against it, understandably. Quebec is the only province in this federation doing it right. The Quebec model is where any serious provincial government needs to go. If they care about their people and the people who elected them, that Alberta flag and that Saskatchewan flag, sans the one in the middle, if they genuinely care about their people, the Quebec model is the only one to learn from. Bill C-5 promises a small carrot for the surrender of provincial autonomy and power to the federal government. And we're not even going to get that carrot. If we go to Daniel Smith's list of demands. Let's just look at that for a minute. Guaranteeing Alberta full access to unfettered oil and gas corridors to the north, east, and west. Unfettered oil and gas corridors. That is federal power imposing those corridors on the rest of the nation, which Bill C-5 attempts to address. The problem is the surrender of provincial authority to the centralized power. That's why Bill C-5 is called the One Canadian Economy Act. I believe it's something like that, colloquially known as that, because it takes away the ability of the provinces to represent themselves. Repealing B-69, not even on the radar. Mark Carney said that he's had no interest during the election in repealing that. Lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast. Have we heard the federal government talk about that? Eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, which is the production cap. Carney wrote a book about net zero, wrote a book about his commitment to all of these unrealistic, deindustrializing, self-destructive, totally anti-people, anti-human policies that are emanating from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. He wrote a book. I mean, this isn't going to happen. Scrapping the so-called clean electricity regulations, not going to happen. Ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate. Why would he abandon something that he wrote a book being committed to? I don't believe it. And if he puts on the table the repeal of some of these things, the price is going to be the provinces sacrificing their ability to engage autonomously. to promote their sovereignty. Returning oversight of the federal industrial carbon tax to the provinces. Who cares about that? Halting the federal, like this is another thing. The carbon tax needs to be abandoned. This nonsense about carbon being the principal threat to humanity, the greatest threat to human survival, has to be abandoned. There is language that still comes out of the Saskatchewan government and the Alberta government talking about net zero by 2050 and these commitments to carbon reduction and carbon capture and all this nonsense. It's just got to go. These are Trojan horse concepts which surrender power away from the Western provinces, not just to Ottawa, but to New York, where the United Nations is headquartered, to the World Economic Forum overseas in Europe, where Mark Carney is now negotiating our future with the Europeans while Parliament has been sent home. Your supposed government, which isn't really a government, halting the federal censorship of energy companies, no export tax or restriction on Alberta's oil and gas. We don't even need to finish reading it because so many of these things are just not going to be delivered by the federal government. So why, at this stage, are we giving press conferences, live action role playing that we can negotiate in good faith with Ottawa? It doesn't make any sense to me. Meanwhile, let's just quickly, before we go back to the media event, Bill C-6, an act for granting His Majesty, the King, through the Governor General, sums of money for the federal public administration for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026. This particular bill issues $149,771,149,015 in spending on your behalf while Parliament has been sent home and you haven't even had a budget voted on in the House. Through the Governor General's signature, you are told the King is a figurehead. You're told the Governor General is just a patronage role. Except the signature, the orders in council, all of these things indicate that true power in this country resides in that office. An office that you can't vote for, an office that you can't recall, an office that has nothing to do with the parliamentarians you elect, because your government is not Parliament. And I know, I drone on about this, but my Lord, it's a really important concept to get. But that $149 billion wasn't enough. We had to have Bill C-7 too, which grants a further $8.5 billion to be paid out for the same period. This raced through the House. It's now before the Senate. It doesn't even have committee debates. This is just reckless spending without any public oversight while Carney's over in Europe. They're looking to ink a defense deal later this month or early in July without Parliament in session that will completely upset our strategic interests. In all honesty, our strategic interests are not in Europe. Our strategic interests are right here in North America. Fortress North America is a good idea. This whole conflict overseas threatens to derail it. I expect later today or early tomorrow that the Americans are going to be bombing Iran. I mean, I don't know how. I don't see a way for that to be avoided now as an outcome. Meanwhile, let me just see here. Airstrikes from Iran have now hit several cities in Israel, including Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, Holon, and Petah Tikva. These strikes are in addition to the strikes that have already been carried out. For the last 2 or 3 days, we've been treated to media which says that Iran's ability to launch sophisticated ballistic missiles has been so diminished, and that is why they're only firing 10 a day. Well, we had a salvo of 20-odd. They made it through. Israel's ability to countermeasure these missiles is being diminished. That's another reason why I think such a preponderance of force is being collected in the Middle East. It does appear that at least at some level, Iran is holding back to do more damage later. Now, I'm not justifying what they do. I don't like the Ayatollahs. As careful as I am to try and represent myself and my thoughts in a way that actually I'm trying to drive at the facts, I don't like the Ayatollahs. I don't like Hezbollah. There's a lot of things and realignments that are happening in the Middle East right now that, if I'm totally honest, from a pragmatic perspective, make my life easier if they're successful. That doesn't change the fact that it's very clear that Israel has committed war crimes. Absolutely. You can't kill tens of thousands of civilians and just shrug your shoulders at that outcome, or justify it because those civilians go to schools, those kids go to schools that teach them, against their will, they don't even have a choice in the matter, to hate the Jews and hate Israel and kill them off. Like, war is hell. I'm not even saying it's avoidable. I don't think it is. The Israel-Palestine thing and the Israel-Islam thing is so symbolized by the Dome of the Rock being built right on top of Temple Mount. I mean, of all the geographic locations in the entire world, every square foot of real estate, those two places had to occupy the exact same spot. It just symbolizes how conflict seems to be built into this and warfare seems to be built into this equation, that there's no other way out of it. I don't like the Ayatollahs. I don't like fundamentalist Islam. But what I am saying is that nothing's guaranteed. A lot of people are walking around pretending that outcomes are completely prescripted and guaranteed. People who have no personal knowledge. I don't have personal knowledge. I can't pick up the phone and call Netanyahu or Donald Trump, and neither can most of the people who are out there confidently proclaiming that outcomes are guaranteed. Even though we have a full and rich history that we can study, which demonstrates that warfare is far from predictable. There's all kinds of war planning that goes into place. But then the plans go out the window as real-world effects are starting to be demonstrated. Most of the people that were around and responsible for the full-fledged kick-off of World War I were convinced that everybody would be home by Christmas. Didn't happen. Even Hitler, with the Polish question, was convinced that the Allies wouldn't act. And even the Allies themselves doubted their ability to act. That's why after Poland was conquered, nothing happened. There was a colloquial term called Sitzkrieg. Even though the World War was kicked off, the Second World War was kicked off, the Western Front was quiet for months. Nothing happened. I was going to go back to this media thing, but in it is discussed all of Alberta and Saskatchewan's plans for the future. Those plans for the future don't mean anything so long as there's this belief that Carney and his government can be negotiated in good faith to have the best interests of Western Canada at their heart. Carney represents one thing: the interests of his class, the interests of finance capital, the interests of the bankers and the financiers and the central banks. You can be guaranteed one thing: Canada will not be ruled by you. It will not be ruled by the citizen. It will be ruled for the interests of the oligarchs in China and Europe and the United States. I don't understand why Western premiers, for 120 years of history, as they highlighted in their press conference, it was 120 years 2 days ago, I believe, the anniversary of the founding of the provinces, every single Western premier has made the same mistake. Everything that they do to represent their interests is framed in the backdrop of Canada. Their commitment to the Federation never wavers. Meanwhile, Quebec, who extracts maximum value from this federation, Quebec, who has done so well for themselves, who is culturally independent, who has more say and more power and more autonomy than any other province in this federation, has done so by constantly threatening to leave. They hold it out over Canada like a sword of Damocles, and the rest of us are just sitting here asking ourselves, what would be so bad if they did leave? How many people do you see on a regular basis wishing that the vote had gone differently in 1995? Let them go is the often and oft-cited feeling and sentiment. Yet our premiers, as good as the work they do, as I've highlighted that the work they do is good in many fronts and many occasions. Premier Moe specifically, I've highlighted for praise because in many ways he's told the feds to stick it. The Saskatchewan Revenue Act, the Saskatchewan Firearms Act, the decision to arbitrarily keep the coal plants open, even though that's a Harper-era rule that they have to be decommissioned after 50 years. We're going to keep them going anyway, and we should. We want cheap energy. We want prosperity. We don't want this nonsense from Ottawa. These are positives, and I don't want to paint too negative a picture. But the problem is we are not willing to commit to making the threat that if we can't get a better deal, we'll leave, and we will consider options, whether with the United States or on our own. We will seriously consider the options available to us, and we'll just unilaterally go. It's what Quebec has done. It's what Quebec has done so well by. Every single premier has been dedicated to Canada. I don't understand because what has Canada done for Western Canada? What has Ottawa ever done for us? It's American money that butters our bread. And people say, Trump's getting involved in this war. He is running record deficits. He's running national debt. He's abandoned many of the things that he campaigned on. Many of his friends are being turned loose by the wayside, or we have kooky Tucker Carlson, or we have the rumors that Elon Musk was on ketamine and the man has to go get a drug test to basically prove that he's not on drugs all the time. We have this ongoing stuff, and many people have said to me, what do you think about the 51st state now? 100 million Americans didn't vote for Donald Trump or his agenda. They voted for that crazy Democrat thing. Does that make the Constitution less valuable? Does that make the superior citizens' rights that you get as an American citizen less valuable? If not 51st statehood or 52nd statehood, we should be learning something from the God-given inalienable rights that the American government recognizes, because you don't have them here. These rights don't come from men. Clyde Do Something made a remark. I can't remember if it was a private conversation or if it was one of his live streams, but and he just kind of summed it up and brought it back into focus for me. And that is that government doesn't bestow rights because the rights come from something higher. It infringes on those rights. And Canada is structured around the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is itself an infringement on your rights, because the Charter states explicitly all of the so-called rights that you have are subject to government approval, the whims of the existing government. And even when they violate your rights, as they did in Ottawa with the Freedom Convoy, whether people like it or not, they violated people's rights. It was determined by the judiciary that that's what happened. Not a single person was held accountable. So if your rights can be violated egregiously and nobody's held accountable for it, you don't have rights. They've been infringed upon in a permanent and lasting way. Mark Carney will enhance that. He will expand that. He will centralize authority in the hands of the technocrats and the central planners, his guideposts, his mentors, his teachers, his partners at the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. That's who he represents, not Canadians, not Canada. Elbows up is elbows down. His business relationships with people in the Trump orbit are vast. But that doesn't change the fact that the Americans have a better system. The fact that they might get involved in this war, that Trump might make the decision, free of Congress, to start bombing another sovereign nation, doesn't change the fact that the Constitution is a superior document. Which is why my interest, either in that or copying that or doing something different, is still valid today. But Western Canada and its political leadership needs to start engaging with the Federation in the way that Quebec has demonstrated is most effective. I'm Frank Vaughn, and I will see you in the next one. Did you know that I have a website, frankvaughn.ca, the ultimate repository for all of my work, and a backup location just in case the censors come for me again. And if you like the content, please consider using the donate link in one of the options available. There are no paywalls, there is no advertising, and there is no Patreon, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you for your time and your consideration.